To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
Disneyland these days is a park that runs almost like clockwork. Every single day you wake up, 365 days a year, Disneyland is open and operating. But all of this had to start from somewhere, and that somewhere is the opening day of Disneyland. That day was July 17th, 1955. What should have been a wonderful day where people got to experience Walt Disney's Magic Kingdom for the very first time ever turned out to be an absolute disaster that no Disney employee who worked during opening day would soon forget. Today I'll be giving you a bit of a backstory behind opening day of Disneyland, what led up to the problems, and what Disney did to eventually repair the damages done by opening day. So come along with me as we examine the fateful opening day of Disneyland, also known as Black Sunday. Walt Disney's Magic Kingdom, Disneyland in Anaheim, California opened on July 17, 1955 to, mixed receptions. But why was the opening to Disneyland met with mixed reviews? It was supposed to be revolutionary for its time, the best thing that happened to the little town of Anaheim. You see, the final months of the construction of the park were kind of a race to the finish. Everyone was scrambling to get stuff done, and because everybody was rushing, obviously the quality of the construction, and more importantly, the concrete, wasn't too great. You see, as the park continued to be built, the bill for the park grew larger and larger. It was costing Walt a lot of money he didn't really have, plus the studio wasn't doing too great at the time. The Disney company, and Walt more specifically, were in a lot of debt to be able to bring Disneyland to life. So, and I mean this literally, in the final minutes before the park opened, they were still scrambling to get things built and constructed. This caused a lot more problems than the Disney company foresaw. The sun was beating down upon the city of Anaheim that day. It was a cool 100 degrees outside, and it didn't help that all of the rides, concession stands, and yes, even the bathrooms started to shut down. They stopped working. And everything during the opening day was captured live on camera for over half the United States to watch on television on a TV show called Disneyland. You see, in order to finance the construction of the park, Walt Disney had made a deal with the TV network ABC, which, funnily enough, Disney owns these days. Is funnily even a word? Whatever, count it. What you've been watching for most of this time is footage from the Disneyland broadcast that aired that fateful, terrible day. But no, that's not where the problems ended. In fact, that's just where the problems began. That wasn't even half of what was on Walt Disney's mind that day. Walt had pushed for a very ambitious opening day, only 1 year and 1 day after initial construction even began. Now, imagine, they announced the construction of Pixar Pier 5 months ago. Okay? That's almost half the time they had to build the entire Disneyland park. From the ground up, mind you, not just a refurbishment or an overlay like Pixar Pier is. Pixar Pier is opening 7 months after they announced it, whereas Disneyland opens 1 year and 1 day. That's a difference of 5 months to build an entirely brand new theme park, the theme park we all know and love today, the crown jewel of the Disneyland Resort, but still, it's crazy. And mind you again that the Disneyland broadcast on ABC was estimated to get around 70 million viewers in a country of 165 million people. So it was no understatement to say literally everybody was watching the opening day of Disneyland hoping for it to be a success, but as we can tell from the title of this video and what I've been talking about before this, that wasn't really the case. To say the opening day of Disneyland was a truly star-studded event would be kind of an understatement. I mean, the president, Ronald Reagan, was there. Future president, I should say. He wasn't the president quite yet. Frank Sinatra was there, Fess Parker was there. It was a lot of famous people at Disneyland that day. While everything was going very, very well in front of the cameras, behind the cameras, not so much. Attractions like the Rocket to the Moon, Peter Pan, and Dumbo the Flying Elephant were all closed. People who visited the very futuristic Tomorrowland, which was supposed to represent life in the future year 1986, were greeted with a very nice picnic area. And like I mentioned earlier, the 100-degree sun was beating down upon Disneyland, which caused the concrete to kind of melt a little bit. And of course, by a little bit, I mean people's shoes and women's heels were getting stuck in the asphalt because it was melting, so it seems kind of like a little bit of a horror movie. Even the Mark Twain riverboat, one of my favorite attractions to this very day, was getting flooded with water because they were overloading the boat. It was sinking into the rivers of America because it weighed too much. Even by Southern California standards, the 7-mile backup to Disneyland on the Santa Ana Freeway was amazing. Probably for the first time in his career, reported the Associated Press, Disney disappointed thousands of youngsters. For years to come, Disneyland workers referred to the opening day as Black Sunday. But there's one thing I haven't discussed yet that had a pretty big role in ruining Disneyland's opening day. That is, of course, the counterfeit tickets being sold to guests upon their arrival at Disneyland. It wasn't only just the counterfeit tickets that people were using to gain entrance to the park. Some people were even climbing the walls. One very smart, enterprising man was even charging $5 per person to use his ladder to climb over the wall to get into Disneyland. Disneyland was only expecting around 15,000 guests to be in the park that day. Instead, they got nearly double that, 28,000 guests. So it was no wonder all the rides and restaurants were breaking down and closing. It's because Disneyland wasn't built to handle that many people on that specific day. I believe the following day, the public was allowed to buy their own tickets and enter, but you had to be invited on opening day to be let into the park. And I suppose with Disney, hindsight is 20/20, because it seems those tickets weren't very hard to fake after all. But even as far as the official Disneyland real non-counterfeit tickets go, they said, admit one and party. Now, party means people you go to the park with. Party was a very loose term. Some people used it to admit their families, which I think was what they were supposed to be used for. But other people, like Ron Dominguez, used it to admit a whole bus full of people. So you can just go ahead and add that one onto the list of capacity problems on opening day. After the dust had finally settled and all the guests had gone home for the night, I can only imagine that some Disney cast members looked around the wasteland that was Disneyland and just shook their heads. Walt was quoted as saying, "We'll settle down and get this place operating. It may take a month before everything's going smoothly, but we'll get it working again." So even though the first day at the park was over, the employees battened down the hatches and got to work fixing everything that had gone wrong. And Walt was right. It did take a few months before everything at Disneyland was working smoothly. The Stagecoach and Frontierland would constantly topple over because it proved to be too front heavy. Those darn guests continued to be a problem, crashing Autopia cars and wrecking them. And apparently, a live tiger broke loose from a circus parade on Main Street, USA, and staged a bit of a death struggle, as they called it in the papers. But of course, with it being Disneyland, that didn't dissuade any guests from visiting, and the park's population passed 1 million visitors only 7 weeks after it opened. And over 60 years later, over 800 million people have passed through those gates. So I guess that just goes to show you, even if the park opening is a failure, even if it's 100 degrees outside, even if everything's breaking down, you can still make a pretty penny by charging $5 a person to climb your ladder and gain entrance into Disneyland. And I think that's the real lesson we should all take away from this. If you can't afford the new ticket price increase or you can't renew your annual pass, just bring a ladder. Hey everybody, thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. I actually posted a video earlier this week with Jean Lafitte, me going around Disneyland Park trying to find a bunch of references to Jean Lafitte in Pirates of the Caribbean, The Haunted Mansion, and also in Tom Sawyer Island. So if you're interested in checking that out, go back one video. It should be the one before this. It's pretty interesting. I thought it was real fun to film, and I hope you guys enjoy watching it. Other than that, please don't forget that t-shirts are actually available now at my Spreadshirt shop, shop.spreadshirt.com/offhandshop. Now I know that's a lot of shop words in there, but I think the name is great. Very easy to remember. It's just that website with all the words shop in the title. Other than that, everybody, just make sure to follow me on Twitter for some more updates regarding the channel, when I'm at the park, where I am at the park, and stuff like that. Also, feel free to donate on Patreon. Sometimes I'll do some giveaways exclusively for Patreon patrons. Or if you just find it in the kindness of your heart to donate and give me a little extra money to help ends meet and help me get into the parks more often, that would be wonderful. Other than that, everybody, thank you all so very much for watching. You guys really mean a lot to me. Don't forget to hit that bell notification symbol because YouTube's kind of messing up with that recently. And aside from that, everybody, thank you all so much for watching. I will see everybody here in the next video. Goodbye.